All right, so what's good? What's good? So let's keep this shit real. A big reason why a lot of so-called black people on social media are upset at what they see happening at Kanye West and Kyrie Irving is because they're upset at the fact that those two people are not being accepted by mainstream society right now. That's the issue in my personal opinion, that's the issue that the majority of so-called black people have when they're upset at what's going on with Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. It's because white zaddy is not accepting them right now. That's really what it is. Because the Negro begs for acceptance. They don't care about power. The average Negro, especially the average Negro male, they yearn for acceptance and validation from other people. They don't give a flying fuck about having power or gaining any type of control or in society. They don't care about that shit. Which is why whenever people come on these panels with other black males and actually give the idea of brothers working together and uniting and organizing together in order to have a level of power, you're going to hear other black males argue with that individual because niggas don't care about power. Niggas care about acceptance and validation. Why do you think for so long you got a lot of black males on the internet, right here on the internet, right? Right here on YouTube land, sitting there talking about having a negotiation table with a group of certain black females that don't give a fuck about them because they want validation and acceptance from other people, especially from the so-called black male. They don't want power. Negroes don't give a, for the most part, Negroes don't give a flying fuck about power. But yet they cry at the end results of not having power. See, what you see going on with Kanye West, people like Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and we could even go to what's this guy's name? Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL player that is now blackballed from the NFL and have been blackballed, right? Those three things are a result of so-called black people as a collective having little to no power at all, but yet speaking up against those with power and suffering the consequences of it. So-called black people are not, for the most part, so-called black people are not concentrated on establishing any type of political, economic, or social power in society, but yet cry and complain about being mistreated. They cry and complain about being quote unquote oppressed. They cry and complain about being discriminated against. They cry and complain about being marginalized. See, these are all these things that I talk about, all these things that I just mentioned are the result of a group of people that lacks power in the society. A so-called black person, unarmed, is walking down the street, they get shot and killed by police. And the police officer, unfortunately, a lot of times are either don't get indicted for shooting that motherfucker, or they get indicted, they go to trial, and they're found not guilty. So-called black people complain about that, not understanding that that type of situation is a direct result of so-called black people as a collective not having any power. Therefore, that cop, just that example that I brought up, that cop who's either found not guilty or not indicted for shooting that Negro is able to get away with it because there is no really little to no power that would make that cop suffer the consequences of what he or she did. Once again, it all comes down to Negro When are you going to fight for power? When? Let me give you an example of power. You know, the word anti-Semitic, right? The word anti-Semitic. When you actually break down that word, which is supposed to be anti-Shemitic with the SH, not Semitic, it's supposed to be those, okay, Semitic, who are Semitic, who is considered people who are Semitic, right? Well, if you go look in the realms of history, right? I'm just giving a historical breakdown of what anti-Semitic is supposed to be, right? Semitic, or really Shemitic, are supposed to be groups of people who are descendants of a biblical character named Shem, who's the oldest son of the biblical figure called Noah, right? A lot of you heard of Noah's Ark. Whether you believe Noah really existed or not, but this is where the terminology came from, right? Noah with Noah's Ark. A lot of you guys know the story. You know, God flooded the world for 40 days and 40 nights. But and he drowned everyone but Noah and his family, right? And the animals that was inside the ark with him and his family. All right. And when the world stopped flooding, what happened? The ark landed on a plot of land. All the animals came out. Noah and his family came out, and they repopulated the earth. So, according to the Bible and Torah, all human beings are descendants of Noah and his three children, right? You got Shem, Noah's oldest son, Ham, and Japheth, right? So, people who are considered Semitic, which, well, like I said before, is supposed to be Shemitic, are descendants of Shem, Noah's oldest son. Now, there's a whole group of people who are descendants, if when you do your history, there's a whole group of people who are descendants of Shem, right? So and these people are considered Semitic. So if you're anti-Semitic, that means you are committing some sort of discrimination against people who are descendants of Noah's oldest son, Shem. Now, there's a whole bunch of people who are descendants of Shem. You got Arabs, the modern day Arabs, according to history. You have the modern day East Indians, right, who are descendants of Shem. So they're considered Semitic people. You have so-called black people who are descendants of, the Negro, the so-called Negro, the descendants of slaves, the descendants of the descendants of slaves of the transatlantic slave trade, right? And then you have the small hats when you do your history. So all these people are Semitic people. But here's where the power dynamic comes into play. You have the small hats, right? That you guys want to call them. The small hats have founded organizations such as the Jewish Defense League, such as the Anti-Defamation League, such as the Southern Poverty Law Center, and other nonprofit organizations that are actually strong. And not only that, these same groups of people have also ended up becoming CEOs of a whole lot of top-notch Fortune 500 companies in America and abroad. They've also owned a lot of mainstream news outlets. They end up owning a lot of your entertainment entities, such as your mainstream record companies, right? such as your radio stations, TV stations, like I said before. Therefore, they end up controlling the media. And with that control, with that ownership, with that control, with these powerful organizations, they have set up a narrative where those who are anti-Semitic are defined as anyone that have done any type of discrimination against the small hats, thus making it seem as if the small hats are the only Semitic people, aka the only descendants of Shem, which is Noah's oldest brother. No, excuse me, Noah's oldest son. So now in 2022, they have the world believe that the only way someone can be anti-Semitic is if someone have committed discrimination against them. When historically there are a whole bunch of different ethnicities of people who are Semitic, or better yet, Shemitic. But guess what? This is what happens when you have power. When you have power and you control mass media, then you control what people see and hear. When you have power, you control organizations that hires a lot of people. Thus, you can make the rules and say, hey, there's a word called anti-Semitic, which means don't disrespect us. You do that, we fire your ass. Hence, look at what Kyrie Irving's going through. Even though Kyrie Irving's he's not fired in anything, but he's suspended for at least 5 games, which means that it could be any number greater than 5 games. Which means that he's not going to be playing basketball in the basketball court anytime soon until further notice, right? This is what happens with power. So because these small hats, as we like to call them on here, have put themselves in a position of power, they are able to control what the word anti-Semitic means. And they're able to dictate that if you are anti-Semitic based on how we define it, your ass is in hot water. Your ass is in trouble. This is power. And personally with me, I can't be upset at that. I have to respect that because this is what people with power do. When you have power, you control the narrative. When you have power, you basically have the big dick and balls to run around and say and do what the fuck you want. This is what happens when you're in a position of power. Thus, the small hats have a lot of power. Therefore, they can dictate what is and who is anti-Semitic. Now, can Negroes do the same? Do Negroes have the power to actually force the world to bend to their will and dictate to the world what is or isn't going to happen? What is going to be accepted, what isn't going to be accepted? Do Negroes as a collective have that sort of power? Of course, the answer is no. And are Negroes willing to even work and fight to gain that sort of power? You know, people want to complain about what's going on with Kyrie Irving. People want to complain about what's going on with Kanye West. But yet they still forget that the that the main thing that we should all learn about all of this is that the ones with the power are the ones that control the narrative. Whether that narrative is true or not, The ones with the power is the one that control the narrative. That's just how it is. And if that narrative, whatever narrative it is untrue, then you must have the power, right? In order to get the world to understand a different narrative. This is what happens when you have power. Like, for example, we have, and I think I've made this statement on my last video about Kyrie Irving. It's called Kyrie Irving, the Powerless Negro. I think I made this point in that video, but I'm going to make this point again, right? You have a lot of so-called black people, or especially people within the Hebrew Israelite community. They're online talking about how, well, Kyrie Irving's telling the truth, blacks are the real Jews, blah, 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 blah. Okay, yeah. So-called black people are the real Jews, right? We are the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are the true descendants of the historical Israelites that the Bible, the Torah, and secular history speaks of. But here's another truth. And that other truth is, so what? So what? You don't have no power to make the world recognize you as such, even though it's true. You don't have the power to get the world to recognize you as such. See, the small hats, who in reality their ancestors converted to Judaism, right? But because they have power, they're able to get the world to recognize them as Israelites, to recognize them as the true blood of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even though they're not, even though they're converts and they're proselytes. But power enabled them to make the world recognize them as such. Can you get mad at that? I personally can't. This is what power does. This is what unity does. See, the small hats, for the most part, they're united, they're organized. And let me tell you something. You got small hats, right? You got different groups of small hats that don't like each other, that can't stand each other, just like any group, right? Me living in New York, where small hats run this damn city, right? I know that for sure. You got different groups of small hats that can't stand each other, that hate each other. But you know what they will do? They will come together and unite for the greater good of their people, regardless of what differences they have with each other. And they will properly organize together. You know what, Sigma American Arcana? Unfortunately, you may be right. You may be right, Sigma American Arcana. The comment says power comes with unity, and I'm afraid that black folks will never choose to unify. Right. Yeah, peace and prosperity to you too. Yeah. Hey man. But this is the thing, Sigma American Arcana. Even though you make a good point, but the choice that black folks make to not unify is one of the main reasons why they're in this predicament that they're in. Being marginalized, being in the bottom of the barrel in almost every aspect of society. This is the direct result of people as a group not unifying and come together as one to actually elevate ourselves in every aspect of society. What's going on, Callie Jane? Callie Jane, it's been a minute since I've heard from you. I mean, if you think about it, right? You have these entertainers and these professional athletes who supposedly stand up for us, right? Who basically stand up for the truth. Kyrie Irving. Let's say Kyrie Irving right now, because right now he's in the news, he's in hot water right now, and basically looks like that his basketball career is at stake. What black-owned organizations exist that is protecting Kyrie Irving right now? Think about it. I mean, the small hats, they have organizations that protects them. And I just named some of these organizations. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, who really is the organization responsible for putting Kyrie in hot water like that. You got the JDL, the Jewish Defense League. You have the Southern Poverty Law Commission, right? No, or excuse me, the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC. Hell, you also have the NAACP, which was partially founded by small hats. And the NAACP protects small hats. All right. Hell, if you know what, I was going to say something about the NAACP, but now I changed that. But let's take these three major organizations: the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Defense League, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. They protect their people. Where are these organizations that protects so-called black people? You can't rely on BLM because BLM, if you really want to break it down, BLM is mostly financed by who? George Soros. And George Soros is a small hat. So you might as well call BLM a small hat organization. Why do you think they quiet about this? It's funny. So-called black people want these black athletes and entertainers that work for small hats to stand up for them and speak the truth. But yet we have no organizations to protect these people, these few black athletes and entertainers that do stand up for the quote unquote truth and suffer the consequences as a result of it. I mean, yeah. Where are all these black organizations? Where are all these high value black men? Where are all these high value black women at? Where are all these thinking black men and women at? Where are all these gods and goddesses at? It's so funny how so-called black people they give themselves so much accolades, talking about how great we are. The black man is God. The black woman is God. You know, all this shit. I'm a high value black man. I'm a thinking black man. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a real nigga. But when it comes down to do some real nigga shit, them real niggas don't show up. And Callie Jane, a lot of these supposed black organizations are heavily funded by the small hats themselves. Come on now. Come on. I mean, we don't even have not one organization willing to protect Kyrie Irving. But yeah, you got so much people on the internet who want to talk about, yeah, Kyrie, go, brother, stand up for yourself. Go ahead. You go, boy. But where are these organizations to protect him? I mean, you know what? The Hebrew Israelite community, right? They're so fragmented. Now, for those of you who see, I'm from the Hebrew Israelite community. So I know this more than a lot of people that the Hebrew Israelite community, or the lack thereof, is so fragmented and so divided against each other. It's to a point where all they are is just a bunch of niggas that memorize Bible scriptures. but they still niggas in the mind, right? That's how they are. That's how they behave. This is how they treat each other. It's like gangs. It's like the Bloods and Crips. It's like if anybody know anything about the Bloods and Crips, you got different blood gangs that hate each other. They all wear the red bandana, right? But then these group of Bloods don't get along with this other group of Bloods. That Bloods over there don't get along with this group of Bloods. Same thing with the Crips. The Crips, they all wear the same blue bandana. But yeah, you got these groups of Crips that hate these other groups of Crips, that hate these other group of Crips, right? That's how the Hebrew Israelite community is. It's like one big nation, but within the nation, they all divide against each other. You got and they divided by different congregations, by different belief systems. But you have all these different Hebrew Israelite congregations, and a lot of them are online talking about how how Kyrie Irving and Kanye West are victims. They know the truth and they're victims, and the reason why they're being blackballed like this is because they out there telling the truth about who they are as a people. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, with all these different Hebrew Israelite organizations or these different congregations, how many of y'all are willing to come together and organize and protect Kyrie Irving or Kanye West? I mean, if you think about it, if anybody's smart, a smart lawyer, a smart lawyer can actually make the attempt to represent Kyrie Irving and put a class action lawsuit against the NBA, right? And charge the National Basketball Association for slander and defamation of character on Kyrie Irving. If they were smart. And you got all these niggas online claiming that they know so much about the law. They study the Black's Law Dictionary and all this other bullshit. They know so much about law and sovereignty and all this other bullshit. But now, when it comes to applying what they claim they know into actually good use, they're nowhere to be found. You hear it's crickets. It's crickets like a motherfucker. But this is what happens when a collective of people have little to no power in society whatsoever. Because when you have no power and the ones with power put their foot down, the powerless Negroes, well, the powerless people, scatter like cockroaches. And not only that, but like I said before, Negroes are only upset at the fact that people like Kyrie Irving and Kanye West are not being accepted by white zaddy. Yes, Jersey Hammer. Yes, yes, Jersey Hammer. Yes, yes, Jersey Hammer. Yes, that's the answer to your question. Yes, and historically, what when the Hebrew Israelites make that statement, they're actually historically accurate, in which there are actual historical records that could prove their arguments to be true. You know, but I won't call. See me, I won't call the small hats fake Jews. I prefer to call them converts or proselytes, which is nothing wrong with another group of people converting into our way of life. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But there is something wrong with another group of people laying claim to a bloodline that really belongs to another group of people. But but Mm. But I'll just leave it like that. And from the words of Ty City, get out of there. Yeah. But to answer your question, Jersey Hammer, the like I said before, the answer is yes. But that's the thing, though. Where's the power? So-called black people, for the most part. What's going on, Lawrence God? What's up? Yeah, Shabbat Shalom, Lawrence God. Shabbat Shalom. So-called black people. So-called black people, as a collective, are more concerned about acceptance and validation by white zaddy and less concerned about establishing some sort of power on a social, economic, and political level. Why? Because that takes work and it takes a lot of sacrificing to establish that sort of power. It takes unification. It takes trust amongst each other. And so-called black people don't have these things, unfortunately. We're not willing to trust each other. We're not willing to work together with each other. We're not willing to even work on ourselves and work on our flaws for so we can actually be properly organized. We're not willing to sacrifice a lot. But at the end of the day, what you see with Kyrie Irving and Kanye West and other people before them are the direct result of so-called black people not having not being in a position of power and not fighting to gain power. Thus, these things happen to them. I mean, think about it. I said this on my prior video about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, as a profession, he's a professional basketball player who all his adult life played for the National Basketball Association, which is owned by who? Adam Silver, whose real name is Adam Silverman. Adam Silverman, he's a what? He's what we call a small hat. He works for them. So you think for one moment that Kyrie Irving is going to do something to make small hats upset and his boss not do something about it? Now, I'm not saying what Kyrie Irving did was wrong, right? When he shared a documentary on Twitter, where the documentary was based upon the true identity of the true Hebrew Israelites, right? But because part of that documentary, it partially agreed with quotes from Adolf Hitler, in which the ADO utilized that to discredit Kyrie Irving and call Kyrie Irving anti-Semitism, because, like I said in my last video, Adolf Hitler is the poster boy of anti-Semitism, being what he was responsible for doing back, you know, during the days of World War II with the Holocaust, right? So the small hats got in power and made sure that Adolf Hitler is the poster boy to anti-Semitism. And if anyone do so much as to publicly agree with anything that he says, Adolf Hitler have said or have allegedly said, then you will be considered to be an anti-Semite. Even if Adolf Hitler says something that might be true, but the small hats have placed themselves in a position of power to say it don't matter if what Adolf Hitler say may be true. If you publicly agree with what he said, you are an anti-Semite. Thus, we will ruin you. This is what people in power are able to do. And that's why I said that although, I said this in my prior video that although I understand what Kyrie Irving did, but he didn't make the wise decision. Because if you're a public figure like Kyrie Irving, right, and you bold and speak up, and you bold enough to speak up on things that is not accepted by the mainstream society, you better use your choice of words and be careful with the sources that you bring up to give the opposition as little room as possible to utilize your words or your sources against you. You have to learn how to play chess. You have to learn how to play chess in this game of life, especially if you're a person of Kyrie Irving's level of influence. When you have a lot of fans behind you, thus having the ability to open up the eyes of other people. Kyrie Irving, what he should have done, he should have put some Bible scriptures from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, and then leave it as a food for thought for his followers. For his to say, hey, who does which group of people fits the eye, it fits the description of this biblical prophecy. I'm not saying you can't be outspoken, you can't speak up, but you have to be wise with how you speak up, especially when you are in the position that Kyrie Irving is in. It's called wisdom. The Bible speaks of, the scriptures speak of having wisdom. Yes, that is true, Lawrence Guy. Lawrence Guy says the small hats are converts, and scripture states there will be more in the end times, as it should be. Yeah. Yeah, that's why there's nothing wrong with other groups of people converting to our way of life. This is why I'm not going to bash the small hats and say they're fake Jews. No, I say they converts, they proselytes. Their ancestors converted to our way of life, which is nothing wrong with that. You know. And Lawrence God continues, says, as far as scripture is concerned, this thing between our people and lack of power is part of the curses we must suffer. Well, it's part of the curses, right? It's part of the curses, but the thing is that the Most High bless those people who get right. Because the thing is with the curses is that you get right, them curses will be lifted off of you. And we don't have to keep enduring those curses unless if we choose to. But going back to what I was saying, right? We live in a world where the ones who are in power are the ones who control the narrative. If you're not in power, you're not going to control the narrative. And if you're going to try to boldly speak up against a group of people that have 10 times more power than you, make sure you do it carefully and be wise with how you go about it. Especially when if you're speaking up against the same group of people that employ your ass, which is the case with Kyrie Irving. I mean, think about it, right? Do so-called black people own their own professional sports league, with the exception of Ice Cube and his Big Three League? I mean, once again, I made this point before. I'm going to make it again. As far as Kyrie Irving is concerned, you play professional basketball for a corporation that's owned by small hats, right? and you're going to share a post on Twitter, a documentary on Twitter, in which part of that documentary seemed to agree with the words of Adolf Hitler. Regardless of those statements were true allegedly by Adolf Hitler, is that a wise move to make? Especially at a time when Kanye West is going through his own thing with the quote unquote anti-Semitism thing. Is that a wise thing to do? Now, once again, I'm not saying that Kyrie Irving should not speak up and express what he believes, but he should be wise with the type of sources that he chooses to share. Once again, you have to be wise when it comes to speaking up against a group of people, when it comes to what you say, especially if a group of people that have the power to get your ass fired or to get your ass blackballed and banned from your career that you worked so hard to build. You better be careful, man. And this is what happens when Negroes are the tail and other groups of people are the head. When you're fighting from a position of not having a lot of power, you have to be real careful with what you do and say. That's just the world we live in. I'm not saying that people cannot express themselves, but you have to be wise with how you express yourself. You have to be wise with the words that you choose. Yeah, Callie Jane, if they make you, they can break you. Oh, it had you laughing? Oh, okay, it had you laughing. Okay. I mean, as you're saying, okay, even if it has you laughing, but I hope you learned something from that video. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to be entertained. Exactly, Lawrence Guy. That's from a scripture. Agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Basically, that scripture is talking about using wisdom when you operate out in the world. You have to be real smart and real strategic with how you move out in the world. Matthew chapter 5, verse 25. Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna insult Kyrie Irving. I'm not gonna say, you know, even though I called him a powerless Negro, in which, most of these professional athletes are powerless Negroes, but it was not my intent to insult or personally attack Kyrie Irving when I said that. My intent was to speak about how as a collective, we're in a position where we're not in control of the society in this we're not in control of this society. So we're in the position of people who are not in power. So if you're going to speak up boldly to a group of people in power, be wise with it. But what I meant by the powerless Negro, what I meant by the powerless Negro is the fact that, number one, as a collective, we don't have socio political and economic control of the society that we live in. So it was not made to personally insult Kyrie Irving, you know. And I'm not gonna sit there and say Kyrie Irving this. I mean, I think I might have said that Kyrie Irving was dumb as fuck and shit like that. I talk like that and shit like that. But I personally don't have a problem with Kyrie Irving. I actually like Kyrie. Hell, I love his sneakers. I have a lot of his signature sneakers. They real nice, real comfortable to wear, and it's at a good price. Shoot. I mean, I've been a fan of Kyrie Irving ever since he was in high school. See, I followed Kyrie Irving ever since he played basketball in high school out in New Jersey, right? And when he went to Duke University back in 2010 and played only 9 games before he got drafted, played only 9 college games before he got drafted in the NBA. Yeah, I remember Kyrie Irving, even back in high school when he was in high school. Yeah. But although I like Kyrie Irving, and I'm glad that the brother is, he's growing in consciousness. He's being more aware of who he is as a person. But once again, he didn't use wisdom when he shared that documentary on Twitter. And I'm not going to say that the documentary is a bad documentary. I'm not going to say that. But being that that documentary expressed an agreement with Adolf Hitler's words, therefore it gave the opposition ammunition to call Kyrie Irving an anti-Semite for sharing that documentary. Thus, Kyrie Irving should have been wiser before he thought about sharing that documentary. That's all my thing with Kyrie Irving is when you not in a position of power and you plan to be bold and be outspoken like that, make sure you're wise enough to use your words correctly. And if you're going to share a certain source, be wise with the source that you're sharing. Because that gives the opposition less ammunition to use these things against you to try to make you look bad. It's called wisdom, people. Thank you, Lawrence Guy. Thank you. Good scripture. The book of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That's how we're supposed to operate. We're supposed to appear to be as harmless as a dove, but be as strategic as a snake. If you know the nature of a snake, snakes are very calculating and they're very strategic. Snakes are very smart animals, right? And they're very strategic. And that's how we have to move internally out in the world. Be very strategic, but at the same time, be harmless. See, snakes are strategic, but they're harmful. But us, we got to be strategic and be harmless when we go out there in the world. Therefore, it gives people or any opposition or your enemies as little chances as possible to have dirt on us. It gives our enemies as little chances to have ammunition to use against us. Yeah. Yes, Lawrence God, that's true. Snakes above all are patient. But once again, when it's all said and done, all these different athletes coming out and being outspoken and their careers become jeopardized because of it, what organizations do so-called black people have to even protect these athletes who is putting their reputation, their careers, and their livelihood on the line to do what we think is speaking up for us? How are we protecting these people? Oh, I forgot. Niggas ain't got no power. And because niggas ain't got no power, these, you know, these Kyrie Irvings of the world, these Colin Kaepernicks of the world, the Kanye West of the world, even though Kanye West is not an athlete, he's an entertainer. But even though he's a public figure, these people, they losing money, their reputations and careers being jeopardized. And here us as a collective, all we doing is sitting down online saying, let's go, brother. Let's go, brother. Come on, brother. Stand up, brother. But this is what happens when you don't have power. All you're left to do is type on the computer and complain about how you mad at what society is doing to Kanye West and Kyrie Irving, and sitting there giving your online moral support to them niggas while their heads is on the fucking chopping block. And because Negroes have failed to fight for power, this is what happens. Because if you Negroes fought for power and fought to have your own, have your own independent leagues prior to 2017 when Ice Cube opened his own independent professional sports leagues, if you owned your own media syndicates, right, and remain ownership of your own media syndicates, therefore you can control the narrative on your own social media networks, right? Therefore, you can control your narratives. Have organizations that protect our people's reputation. Therefore, that would reduce the chances from these things happening. Yeah, exactly, Lawrence Guy. Exactly, Lawrence Guy. This is how the so-called Black collective thinks. They think that it's okay for one successful person to sacrifice him or herself for the rest of the collective, while the rest of the collective don't take any risks at all. While the rest of the collective can sit back and relax and not suffer the consequences of shit. Yeah, this is another thinking of a large collective of so-called black people. He got money, he'll be all right. He got money, he'll be all right. Oh, dismissive and shit. Negro, you can't be sitting there playing basketball and being paid millions of dollars by a certain group of people, but sit there and do something that make these same group of people disrespected, make these group of people feel disrespected, then sit there and all defiant and say, I'm not going to apologize and not expect to suffer any consequences. Once again, you can't sit down and play basketball, for a certain group of people, do something that make these same group of people upset, refuse to apologize, and accept and expect not to suffer the consequences. I mean, you got these Negroes on the internet who's all mad and upset at what's going on with Kyrie Irving. But to me, it's just simple logic. These people have, these small hats, right? They own the same league that you play basketball for. Do something to make them upset, refuse to apologize. So they use their power to fuck you in the ass. And so-called black people are upset at the end results of it without understanding what power is. This is what happens when a group of people have power over you. They can do that. So, what is the lesson to be learned out of all this for so called black people? In my opinion, it should be to gain power and stop fucking playing around. I don't know. Well, I guess what I said within this 55 minutes and 9 seconds of this video is going to go in one ear and not the other to a lot of Negroes listening to this shit. But it's all good. Anyhow, I'm out of here, man. I got a life to live. Peace.